Hello everybody and welcome back to Brilliant Shadows. We just ran from the school, cause it's getting real. They made their escape in silence. Ash was in open air before she'd really thought to move her feet. The smell of a storm brewed in the distance.
Are we gonna be okay?
We have 5 of the best mages in the mountain. We'll be better than okay.
Hector and Prude seemed both ill at ease. The high spirits of Belinda and her partner did not seem to be capable of being dampened. Ash merely wondered why she was there.
We'll be great.
The rain fell down on them with a torrential force that left the world around them soft.
You're so useless, Elfnod.
Her voice feigned humor, but the sharp edge to the tone told the truth behind the words.
I am sorry. Shielding is one of my weaker skills.
I am also sorry. I have nothing in my kit that could provide cover from rain.
I don't really expect any of you three to provide a solution.
Prude's hands were above her head, a shield casting aside rain as it fell. The gesture was technically unneeded, but it had always helped her focus.
Unless... Ash, do you think you can grow an oak?
Sure, got a dead one around here.
The vast fields that surrounded the isolated mountain left no such growths.
I am glad we stopped walking, though. That muck would be awful to march through.
If only we had a witch.
A witch requires living or fresh-picked plants for their spells. I think we'd be in the same boat, even with a witch.
Hector grumbled. A flash of lightning crawled across the sky and bleached the earth in a pale blue light. In that flare, Ash caught sight of a figure in the distance, pale gray robes hooded, standing stock still, and then as the light faded, lost to the darkness.
There's someone out there.
Who would be fool enough to follow us in this weather?
The lightning burst across the sky, and in that pale light, there was nothing. She was sure she had seen someone. Her finger pointed to the spot just as lightning struck again. There was nothing.
What did you see?
A figure in a pale cloak.
The group stared out into the darkness. Hector shifted, his eyes betrayed the fear he hid from his face. He drew his strange sword and offered it to Prude. She took it without a word.
We move.
Oh, what about the mud?
We will have to deal with it.
You can't be serious.
AElfnod took in a deep breath and a small burst of white wrung out from his body. Ash's fatigue faded slightly.
Wow, already learning to heal?
It's not much, but it'll help us last the night.
I wish I had a dead horse.
With that, the group began to march, the dry patch quickly growing thick with mud behind them. The sun had crawled high into the sky. The ground was still thick with mud, but their feet no longer sank so deeply.
I think we should have brought food.
There are a few meals in my backpack.
When were you going to share that information?
When I felt safe again.
Hector, we aren't all as capable as you in the regard of stamina. We need a break.
Hector turned to Prude, who nodded. Taking stock of herself, Ash was surprised to find she was far less tired than she should be. Had Elfnod been assisting her through the night? Judging by the ragged nature of both him and his pair, she doubted it. She dared not say it, but the pursuant Grey Mage may be responsible for her vigor. As Ash felt a hint of pride that she thought did not send a shiver down her spine. She was getting better at suppressing those. Hector retrieved a number of capped pitchers, clearly stolen from the cafeteria, and began to offer them around.
The stew from yesterday. When did you get this?
The young cook who watched the ritual gave them to me. I suppose he was as aware as anyone else as to the events that were about to transpire.
Ash raised her eyebrows.
Hey, speaking of transpiring, what happened last night? What's so scary about someone in a pale cloak?
Belinda? That's the traditional garb of a gray mage.
Belinda's eyes darted the way they came, and she slowly took a draw from her pitcher.
We made enough tracks that a blind child could follow us.
Hiding won't work on a Grey Mage. They can sense magic in much the way the Rod of Finding can.
That's why we were so keen to run, Belinda.
Then why did we stop?
Belinda took a long draw from her pitcher and offered it back to Hector as she stood up.
Let's go.
The rest of the group emulated the gesture.
We need to move quickly.
Why is a gray mage interested in us?
Because of me.
Because it's after me.
Silence fell across the group.
I agree.
Another silence echoed.
Wait, why would...
My mark. There's a chance that I am paired to a gray mage.
The silence continued, deafening. Ooh, the sun had begun to crawl skywards before they stopped again. Prude raised one hand, the group halting at the command, too exhausted to question it. Placing a finger to her lips, she gestured for silence. The group quickly made to rest. Belinda removed her shoes to find raw, bloodied feet. The rest of the group fared better, most at least marginally callous, though Ash's feet were still red and cracked.
Owie.
Belinda grew silent with a single look from Prude. When had she assumed such command of their group? Hector cocked his head, turning silently towards Prude, who pressed her ear to the earth. A moment passed.
Hoof beats?
There!
Following Elfnod's finger, Ash saw a small force of mounted infantry in the distance. Above them flew a black flag with an intricate white pattern.
Mom?
How would your mother know that we were here?
Oh, I asked a friend to send a messenger bird on the way out. I didn't want to walk the entire distance.
Belinda! I could kiss you!
Belinda flushed and spoke under her breath.
No complaints here. Please do.
The man missed the comment, and Ash grimaced. That would definitely not end well. The others appeared to have missed the comment as well, as they raised their voices and waved. Is now the time? Am I the one? Oh, I don't know what to do. Oh god, I'm a big proponent for meddling, but I probably shouldn't be. Also, he told us that. And, like, I don't know, but that's his partner, and also she obviously has feelings for him. But it's not our information to tell, but also... he was very open with us, and that's his part. Now doesn't feel like the time. Try to warn her. Guys, I'm literally, this is one of the hardest decisions I've had to make. I feel like now's not the time or the place. I'm gonna keep quiet. I think that's a conversation they need to have later. Ash grimaced the moments passing. Why was that a bad face? That's not
They
evil.
Must have been riding full tilt since the other day, even through that rain.
Let us pray they might continue that pace. We need a way to ensure we can escape that damnable gray mage.
Turning behind, Hector threw both hands into the air in an obscene gesture towards the empty plains behind them.
Find us now, shit-slingers!
Oh, I like that one.
Finally learning curses?
It's what Mother would want.
The cavalry seemed to spot them and course-corrected towards their band. The group seemed to breathe a collective sigh, and removing their minimal provisions, they finished off the now ice-cold stew. The Mud Skipper Inn had always been considered quaint and simple. While the beer was well stocked and the beds warm, it would never be considered appropriate for royalty. When the royal guard arrived with the Princess of Celeste and her entourage, the innkeeper found himself debating the merits of asking them to leave simply because he lacked appropriate accommodations. Upon actually seeing the disheveled, muddy heap of a princess, he reconsidered and wondered what conditions she might have suffered before now.
And make sure that you have all the men housed inside. Sleep in the cellar if you need to. The sky looks foul above us.
But make sure to have 2 guards on duty at all times, with frequent turnovers. We may be hunted, and after only a day's travel, I would not question if the Grey Mage could still catch us.
Yes, milady. Yes, my lord.
I'm not a lord.
Hector made to follow the guard and correct him, but Prude placed her hand on his shoulder.
You are. You're married to a lady. Precedent is that you are now a lord.
What hell is frozen that Hector is now a lord?
Aren't you the son of a king or something, Elfnod? Does that mean I'm a princess?
No, my father is an elected official.
What does that make you?
Nothing at all.
Belinda looked disappointed at that. The group settled quickly, retreating into a familiar efficiency. Before long, they were bathed and groomed, meeting once more in the center of the inn, where the innkeeper was quick to have his son serve them. An odd, knowing glance fired between Aelfnod and the younger man, entirely missed by Belinda, despite the fact she did not take her eyes off him once. Warm bread and tall glasses of mead slowly filling their bellies left the group in a particularly chipper mood.
Throwing you out to school won't mean war or anything, correct?
Hardly. There's an unfortunately large amount of precedent for expelling princesses.
Milady, the king asked that we send a message back upon your arrival to a safe place. Would you be so kind as to write something for her?
Of course. I'll be right back.
Prude walked away and Hector turned to Ash.
Are you a lady, Veronica?
No. My mother was a servant, and shortly after I turned 3, I became the princess's playmate. And don't call me that.
What is Prude's father like?
I never knew. He died before she was even born.
Ah, then the queen remarried?
No, the king is Prude's mother.
So the king was once a woman?
No, she's still a woman.
So it's a title then?
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
Then would that make Prudence a prince? And would it, under the circumstances that we were to wed, make me a princess?
Oh my god, I hope so. That'd be so cool.
I don't think that's quite how it works.
Princess Hector. I think it suits you better than the title of head.
Is she okay? Is she drunk?
I agree. I look forward to the marriage.
Hector did not respond, instead retreating into thought. Before any further jokes could be had at his expense, Prude returned. She looked to her pair, still deep in thought.
Oh no, what did you get into his head?
Prudence, I am afraid I cannot marry you. While I do not mind being a princess, I simply cannot handle any excess of pink. And I find dresses far too restrictive of movement.
What?
Hector opened his mouth to explain, but Prude interrupted with a finger to his lips. She kissed him on the forehead and sat across his lap.
Don't try to explain. I prefer to keep your inner workings a mystery.
Ash felt a twang of jealousy as the two grew close, but for once it was not specific to a lust for Prude. It was the fact that she was sitting so close to a happy couple. Jealousy pulled at her heart. Belinda elbowed Ash and beckoned her to lean down, where she whispered in Ash's ear.
I found the prettiest princess on top of a pile of his books at the library the other day.
Okay. Ash raised her eyebrow. That explained a few things. Belinda hiccuped and smiled at her before turning back to the conversation.
I think I need to step away for a moment.
In unison, the quartet raised their mugs in a sort of mock salute as she departed, the motion almost toppling Belinda, who had ingested a fair bit more than the others. Yeah, that explains a lot about how she's acting. Some called alcohol liquid courage. Ash hoped Belinda did not find enough to make a fool of herself to Aelfnod. They need to have a conversation, though. Which I am not the bad guy for not pointing out. I normally would. I'd be like, Metal, let him know. But, like, we were on the road and our feet were raw. And I was like, maybe I don't want it to cause a fight in the middle of everything right now. Like, I'd tell her, well, now she's drunk again. I don't know. Ash let herself out the front door and watched her breath curl outwards in a white fog as she let out a sigh. The night was far colder than the last two had been that followed than the last two that had followed them here. Fortune had favored them that they could find shelter from the chill. Ash's eyes turned upwards towards the dancing snowflakes, fluttering like a sea of shooting stars in the reflection of the inn's lamps.
Beautiful.
She spent a time in night's silence, appreciating the beauty when the significance of the world around her finally dawned. Silence. Given the number of men that were with them and the fact that they should still be busy stabling horses, the silence was an anomaly. A horse, still in its saddle, began to walk slowly past, dripping down to chew at a patch of sparse vegetation. In the distance, she saw a figure in a pale cloak.
No.
Fear held her still for a moment before the hot blood of panic drove her to move. Running back inside, Ash found her companions asleep in the den of the inn, nestled in a motley assortment about the furniture which surrounded the hearth. The warmth struck her with a wave of exhaustion the cold had edged back. She did not let it consume her.
Wake up. Wake up!
Hector and Prude were on their feet with a swift and practiced ease, both in battle stances, and Hector's left hand had a knot of black energy. AElfnod fell out of the seat with Belinda falling shortly after.
The Grey Mage found us. The guards are gone.
Nonsense, the men are just...
He paused as he cocked his head. Could he hear the silence from in here? Hadn't he noticed the hoofbeats earlier? She quashed the thought as he reached for his pack, still at his side.
We need to get to the horses.
They should be in the stables. We must move quickly.
The guard opened the door, kneeled over, and a blackened ooze began to pour from his... The guard opened the door, kneeled over, and a blackened ooze began to pour from his open mouth. Hector drew his sword, handing his pack to Prudence.
Run! I will hold it off.
Like hell.
Like hell you will.
Ash did not even give Hector a chance to register her words, grabbing his cloak from behind and dragging him past her. She freed the sword from his hand in a swift flourish and hefted it. The balance was perfect. It was light and suited her. She couldn't help but wonder from a heartbeat why Heck would have a sword like this.
Ash!
No. This is my demon to face. This is my battle to fight. Take Prude and get out of here.
Ash turned away from him.
Keep her safe.
The doorway filled with the silhouette of the pale tan cloak. Ash aimed the blade towards the mage's neck.
Go.
She heard the footsteps fade quickly as they escaped. Slowly, with a practiced ease, the gray mage threw back its hood. A face stained black by necrosis, though still as animate as a living man's, met her gaze with white, glazed eyes. The man sneered.
Hello, girl.
His eyes flicked to her blade, and his sneer seemed to deepen.
Do you know what it is you hold?
Admittedly, not in any particular sense. Obviously, it's a sword.
A sword, she says. Does she not know what she holds? Arla? No, of course she wouldn't.
A shiver ran down Ash's spine, and for once she did not struggle to suppress it.
Yeah, I'm going to assume Arla is your pair whose organs you stole.
Stole? No. We became as one.
Ash really didn't want to hear this. She drove forward, concentrating all her effort into driving the blade home. Inside her, she felt a fire burst to life, and all at once she felt as light as the air itself. The distance between them was gone in a heartbeat, and the blade tore the air directly beside the gray mage. She had missed, her balance thrown off by her long dress.
Light and shadow.
She didn't let him finish the sentence, bringing her blade down hard. Ash felt flesh tear as the gray mage leapt back, his milky eyes wide. Her advantage, and by extension herself, would only survive as long as she pressed the attack. If the mage had more than a moment to recover, the gap in their power would become apparent. She pulled back for another swing when she noticed the knot of black arching towards her. Desperately, Ash flung herself, trying to evade. The black knot struck her on the side of her throat, and she began to choke. Weakness took her, and her grip gave out, the blade clattering to the ground. She gasped, but her breath found no purchase.
Impressive. I hadn't imagined the sword would give you access to both pools.
His words meant nothing as she clawed at her own throat, desperate for air. He loomed over her.
A beautiful specimen. It is unfortunate you are already paired. I could use a heart as strong as yours.
Somehow, amidst it all, she looked at his hands. His mark was twisted, so abstract she could not tell its shape. This was not her pair. A weight lifted from her and she tore out the tiniest gasp.
Strange you should seem so revulsed by a gray mage when you travel with one.
Hector? Hector was a gray mage? She had been right, but how? Why? Prude! Do we know it's him? Her hand closed around a hilt. When had she even begun to grasp for it? Her next movement was more swift than her addled mind could begin to follow. The blade dashed through his neck, his jaw, through his skull, and out the top as easily as a sword in the softest muck of the training field. The gray mage stood for a moment as though unsure. He convulsed and then collapsed.
Did I just win?
The response was immediate.
You little bitch!
The creature surged forward, grabbing her blade and wrenching it free, a black ichor leaking from the wound she had dealt.
Ah!
Ash desperately groped for a weapon, anything. All she found was one of her roses still fresh in its black petals, a stain of dark on the already poorly lit room. She breathed in the smell, searching for strength, and to her surprise, she found it. Something seemed to catch fire in her chest, a burning sensation that boiled in her lungs. With a cough, she let it out. Inky blackness erupted from her mouth, curling like a plant sprouting with impossible speed. The growth engulfed the gray mage, and then it flowered.
No!
The gray mage's screams were brief before the dark flower-like flames did their work. Dissolving the creature slumped it to its knees, little more than charred lumps remaining of its extremities. She stared at the body. The full realization of what she had done dawned upon her. Buckling over, she erupted with the recent banquet she had eaten. A moment of relief, and she retched again. Hector! Prude! With effort, she found her feet. Ash exploded out the front door, staring out into the silent white night. Hoofprints were being lost in the fallen snow, leading away from the stables, leading to Celeste.
They escaped. Thank the goddess.
Snow crunched behind her. In the darkness, her eyes met a gray cloaked figure. Silence stood between them. Ash raised the blade with an unsteady arm.
Don't cross me tonight, or I'll end you just like I did the last gray mage.
Whoa, okay. This obviously isn't the best time for you. We can talk later then.
Without another word, the figure retreated into the darkness. Did that count as a win? Ash decided that would be a yes. Definitely a win. The celebratory mood lasted about as long as it took her to realize there were no horses left. With a groan, she took a deep breath and broke into a slow trot. Her fist was still clutching the black and white blade though she feared nothing more than losing it. As she ran, though she struggled against them, so too did her thoughts. Guys, people, y'all. Each day was a tiny fragment of the hells below. But we won't know about that until the next episode. Thank you so much for watching. I think that might have been our partner. Also, is Hector a gray mage? Is he accidentally a gray mage? Is AElfnod? Because, like, the immediate thing is you'd think it'd be Hector, but what if it's someone else? I don't know. So far, I'm really enjoying it, and if you want to see what's going on with this, you will have to subscribe. You probably already are if you're this deep in the series, but in case you're not, make sure you do. I'll see you tomorrow night. Take care of yourself, and stay safe. Bye-bye.